After 22 years in the Army, 5 tours overseas, a steel plate in my shoulder, and enough ghosts to keep me company till the end, I wanted peace. Not medals, not attention, just quiet. That's why I bought the pumpkin farm. Whispering Creek Farm wasn't much when I signed the deed. Just over 7 acres on the outskirts of a suburban neighborhood called Hollow Brook. The house was a fixer-upper. The barn leaned a little to the left, and the soil hadn't been turned in years. But there was something about it, maybe the way the creek actually whispered through the backfields, or the scent of dry earth after a rain, that told me it was where I needed to be. I didn't buy it for business. I bought it to breathe. Every morning I walked the rows barefoot, planted by hand, repaired fences, fed the 3 goats my niece gifted me as a joke. One of them, Marvin, head-butted the mailbox off its post the day I installed it. Life was simple. I had my coffee with the sunrise, and I fell asleep with the cicadas humming lullabies. The HOA barely registered at first. Hollow Brook had rules, sure, mailbox height, grass length, fencing permits, but none of it applied to me. I was outside their jurisdiction. The property technically sat just beyond the HOA's line. My driveway shared a right-of-way with the development, but my land was exempt. That wasn't an accident. I made sure of it when I bought. Still, they sent me the welcome letter. Dear neighbor, it began. We'd love to have you attend our Fall Festival Planning Committee next Thursday. I didn't go. A month later, someone dropped off a packet about preferred exterior paint colors for structures within the HOA visual corridor. I ignored it. I wasn't repainting my barn autumn amber just because someone named Marla Jennings liked it better than weathered red. It was around that time I met her. She wore a cranberry-colored blazer, white slacks, and oversized sunglasses, like she was auditioning for Real Housewives of Suburbia. She knocked on my door at 9:07 a.m. sharp, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. Hi there, I'm Karen Winslow, the events chair for the Hollow Brook HOA. I nodded. Retired Sergeant Major Tom Rourke. Can I help you with something? Her smile had a pinch to it. Well, I was just driving by and noticed your lovely pumpkins. They're just darling. And with the season coming up, we thought, well, wouldn't it be amazing to host a few community tours here? Just a small thing, a few families, kids with cider and hay bales. I stared at her deadpan. You want to host events on my land? Oh, not host exactly, just coordinate. It would be great for the community. You have such a picturesque little operation here. It wasn't a question, it was a sales pitch. And it was delivered like she already had it in the HOA calendar. I chose my words carefully. I appreciate the thought, but this is private property. I'm not open to tours. She blinked, confused, as if she'd just heard the word no for the first time in her life. But it would benefit the neighborhood, she insisted. Think of the children. And honestly, our neighborhood social engagement metrics have been low since the block party last spring. This could be a revival. Karen, I said flatly. I served in places where people didn't have clean water, let alone pumpkin tours. I'm not interested. She tilted her head. Are you sure? Because if you're not going to use this space for the good of the community, there are other options we can explore. Sometimes properties fall under visual domain regulations, especially if they affect the HOA's image. I cut her off. I'm not in your HOA. She sniffed. That's technically true. But our lawyer said the shared right-of-way means nothing, I said. My attorney reviewed it. I'm exempt. This land is mine. Always was, always will be. Karen smiled again this time, like she was chewing glass. Well, I guess we'll see. She walked away that day like someone had just dared her to make me regret saying no. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next week, I found 3 HOA flyers pinned to my mailbox, one under my windshield wiper, and most insultingly taped to Marvin's goat pen. Fall Family Tours. They read in bold orange font. At Whispering Creek, Pumpkin Farm, starting October 1st. My farm. My name. Without one word of permission, I marched down to the HOA office, which was really just a converted garage with administrative services written in Comic Sans on the door. Inside, Marla Jennings and Karen were sipping pumpkin spice lattes, like this was all one big seasonal celebration. When I laid the flyer on the table, Karen didn't flinch. Oh, that, she said airily. Just a mock-up for marketing, nothing official. Then why did 3 people knock on my door asking where to sign up for pumpkin painting? She blinked. Community enthusiasm. Rescind it, I said, publicly, now. Karen leaned forward, smile gone. Tom, I don't think you understand. This isn't just about your land. This is about Hollowbrook's spirit, if you don't want to be part of that. Well, I'm sure the board can look into what restrictions apply to your fencing water usage or livestock noise ordinances. We're quite thorough. She was bluffing. But the problem with people like Karen is that they bluff until someone doesn't call it. I walked out that day knowing something had shifted. This wasn't about pumpkins anymore. It wasn't even about the HOA. This was personal. And something told me Karen wasn't finished. 3 days after that tense showdown at the HOA garage office, I thought the matter was done. I'd made my boundaries clear. Whispering Creek Farm was off limits. No tours, no flyers, no unauthorized visitors. But when I opened my gate that Friday morning, the first thing I saw was a child maybe 8 years old hopping out of a minivan parked halfway on my gravel driveway. Behind him came a gaggle of parents clutching thermoses and phone cameras. A woman with a stroller looked up and waved. "We're here for the 9:30 tour," she called. I stared at her. There's no tour. Her face crumpled in confusion. Karen said she passed out the flyers said to be here 15 minutes early. I looked past them and saw not one, not two, but 4 cars idling on the shoulder. One of them had a paper sign taped to the windshield, "Pumpkin Tour Drop-Off." I closed my eyes, counted to 3, then exhaled slowly. "You're on private property," I said. "There's been a mistake." They left, eventually, murmuring apologies, clearly embarrassed. But as I turned to go back inside, I noticed a strange cloying scent on the breeze like nutmeg, cinnamon, and saccharin overkill. I followed it. At the edge of my property, along the shared right-of-way, someone had set up a table folding plastic HOA beige. On it were flyers, caramel apples, miniature paper cups of cider, and God help me a donation jar that read, "Support your HOA Autumn Fund." And standing behind it, Karen Winslow, cranberry blazer again, smiling like she owned the place. "Morning, Tom," she sang as if we were old friends. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" She blinked at me innocently. "Greeting guests. I'm not on your property, technically. This is shared space, perfectly within my rights. You're advertising a tour of my land." "No, I'm informing residents of optional community activities. If they happen to wander nearby, well, who can stop children from exploring pumpkins? You're trespassing. You've hijacked my name and business for an HOA scam, and now you're collecting money." Her lips curled just slightly. Donations. Voluntary, of course. I snapped a photo with my phone of the table, the jar, the flyers. She flinched. "I'd take that down," I warned. "Now." Karen didn't respond. Instead, she twisted the lid on her cider thermos and took a dainty sip. "Tom, you really ought to be more neighborly. You're giving people the wrong impression. This is a chance to build goodwill. Be a part of something bigger." "I've already been a part of something bigger," I said. It involved a war and a uniform. Now I'd like to grow pumpkins and not be manipulated by a clipboard tyrant. She raised a brow. "So you're comparing the HOA to a war zone?" I smirked. "At least in war you know who the enemy is." That night, I installed 2 trail cameras, one at the end of the driveway, the other facing the goat fence. The next morning, I awoke to Marvin howling like a banshee. When I rushed outside, I found a sign zip-tied to the pen. Met Goat Petting Zoo, Sundays at noon. Suggested donation $10. I tore it down. Marvin headbutted it in agreement. It was no longer just annoying. It was calculated, strategic. She was testing my patience using every inch of ambiguity in the HOA's policies to chip away at my rights. Worse, she was framing it as a community event, making it harder for me to push back without looking like a curmudgeon. I started collecting evidence, screenshots, flyers, a copy of the HOA newsletter with Whispering Creek feature coming soon in the corner. I even managed to record a video of Karen addressing a group of parents near the street, pointing at my property as she said, "We're so lucky Tom is letting us do this. He's a real community hero." I wasn't sure what infuriated me more, the trespass or the fake praise. Later that day, I visited the county zoning office. The clerk, a balding man named Barry, who smelled faintly of printer ink, pulled my parcel data. "You're completely outside their jurisdiction," he confirmed. "They've got no authority over you." "Can I file a formal complaint?" He squinted. "Against the HOA, technically yes. You could also file a cease and desist for misuse of your land in advertising, or civil trespass if anyone steps foot past your fence line." I nodded. "What if they collect money based on a lie?" Barry's eyebrows rose. "Now you're talking about fraud." Back home, I found 3 more minivans parked near the ditch. I asked them to leave. One parent complained that they'd paid already. Another said they were told this was part of the HOA festival package. That night, I emailed Karen a simple message. Subject: unauthorized use of my property. Karen. Cease all promotional materials or references to Whispering Creek Farm. You do not have my permission to host tours events or fundraising on or in association with my land. Any further action on your part will be considered trespass, misrepresentation, and potential fraud. Tom Rourke. She didn't reply. But 2 hours later, a new post appeared on the HOA community board. Due to unforeseen changes, the autumn family tours have been postponed. We apologize for any confusion. And at the bottom, let's all remember to be kind, even when some among us choose not to share. I read it twice. That wasn't a white flag. It was a declaration of war. By now, I knew better than to think a passive-aggressive HOA message meant the end of anything. Especially not with someone like Karen. She was the kind of person who took boundaries as suggestions and politeness as weakness. And I had been polite too polite. That email should have come with legal stationery and a notary stamp. The next week started off quiet. No flyers, no cars, no cider tables or hay bales staged near the easement. For 2 days, I let myself believe it was over. I spent that time pruning the vines, checking for rot, and marking which pumpkins would be ready first. I even started sketching an idea for a small Veterans Harvest event I dreamed about, invite-only, no advertising. Just good folks and good food on a cool October afternoon. But on Wednesday, things shifted again. It started when I noticed a drone. A small one, black, buzzing low over the eastern field. At first, I thought maybe it belonged to one of the neighborhood kids, so I waved it off. But when it returned the next day, hovering longer and edging dangerously close to my farmhouse window, I stepped outside with a garden rake and pointed. "You're trespassing." The drone zipped upward as if startled and disappeared. I reviewed the footage on the trail cams. The drone had launched from a cul-de-sac bench just outside the HOA boundary. 3 kids sat there at one point, but at another, the bench was empty, except for a woman in white slacks and a windbreaker. Karen. I was done playing nice. That night, I drafted a formal cease and desist letter, the real thing this time, complete with a header, my land parcel number, and citations from the local zoning code. I had it notarized at the UPS store, then sent a digital copy to the HOA's official email with read receipt enabled. No reply. Instead, the next morning, a package arrived. It was wrapped in festive orange and brown paper tied with twine. No return address. Inside was a mason jar of organic pumpkin butter, a handwritten tag that read, "From the heart of Hollow Brook," and a brochure printed in full color on glossy cardstock. Pumpkin and Praise, a seasonal tour of community values. There on the front page was a photograph of my field, my pumpkins, my barn, my goat Marvin mid-headbutt no less, with a caption beneath it. A special thanks to Tom Rourke for sharing his land with the neighborhood. I dropped the brochure like it was toxic. This wasn't just overstepping anymore. This was theft. Intellectual property, identity, reputation, all leveraged by Karen to paint me as her willing accomplice. I could already see it coming. If I dared challenge her, she'd flip the script, make me the villain. The grouch who ruined the community's wholesome tradition. And then the cherry on top. That same afternoon, I got a voicemail from someone at Wilmot County Family Magazine. "Hi there, Mr. Rourke. We're doing a feature on Hollow Brook's Fall Heritage Tours, and we'd love to stop by for some photos and an interview. Karen said you'd be available Friday at noon. Let us know, thanks so much." I gritted my teeth so hard I thought I'd chip one. That night, I took out my old duffel bag. Not for weapons, those days were long gone, but for paperwork. I still had my land purchase documents, zoning approvals, and recorded audio from Karen's earlier offer, where she clearly said, "If you don't want to participate, we'll just have to find other ways." Let the record show I had said no, clearly, calmly, more than once. And I had proof. But just as I began organizing it all, the lights on my porch flickered, then cut out. I checked the breaker fine. The rest of the house power was on. But my exterior security system dead. Cameras weren't responding. I stepped out with a flashlight. That's when I saw the cable. Someone had clipped the power line running to my perimeter cam and porch light. Clean cut. No chew marks. Not a raccoon. Not weather. Intentional. I called the sheriff's department. A deputy named Grayson showed up within the hour. Grayson was sharp, young, level-headed. The kind of officer I would have recruited back in my Army days. He listened carefully as I laid it all out. The flyers, the drone, the fake brochure, the visitors, the photo in the magazine, the clipped line. I showed him the footage, the emails, the legal documentation. He took it all in. Then he gave me a look that landed like a steel toe to the chest. Sir, he said, I believe you. But here's the thing, Karen's already called us. I blinked. What? She filed a report 2 days ago. Said you'd been threatening her, yelling across the fence line, intimidating families. There's an open record. My stomach dropped. She what? I can see it doesn't add up. Grayson added quickly. Her report's flimsy. No video. No witnesses willing to corroborate. But it's in the system now. That complicates things. I shook my head. She's laying a paper trail. She's building a narrative, he agreed. You're the reclusive vet with animals and a temper. She's the mom trying to promote family fun. It's messy. I gripped the edge of the porch railing to steady myself. She's trying to bait me, I said. She wants you to blow up. Lose your temper. Give her exactly what she needs to press charges. Grayson nodded solemnly. Well, I said quietly, then I won't. He raised an eyebrow. I'll fight her, I said. But not her way. I've seen real warfare. This isn't a fight of fists. This is a fight of records, of facts, of patience. He smiled. Then document everything. From here on out, treat every flyer, every drone, every step she takes near your land like evidence. I nodded. You got it, deputy. And as he drove off, his headlights bouncing down the dirt road, I made a silent promise to myself. If Karen wanted a battle, she'd get one. But she wouldn't see it coming. Saturday morning brought fog to the fields. A low silver mist crawled over the pumpkins like smoke across a battlefield. I woke early, as usual, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the goats stir in their pen. Then I heard the sound of an engine slow and heavy crunching gravel under oversized tires. At first, I thought maybe it was a delivery truck. But as I stepped outside, mug in hand, the fog began to clear just enough for me to see the lettering on the side of the vehicle. Hollowbrook Fall Family Tour. Sponsored by HOA. No. The bus was white with harvest-themed decals on the side, pumpkins, hay bales, cartoon leaves. The kind of thing you'd expect from a school field trip. Except this one had a vinyl banner taped along the front windshield. Next stop, Whispering Creek Farm. My farm. From the open side door, a cheerful voice rang out. All right, everyone, stay in your seats. Mr. Rourke is just getting ready for us. I marched toward the bus like a soldier on deployment. The driver, a teenager, maybe 19, froze when he saw me. He wore an HOA volunteer badge, laminated and crooked. You're trespassing, I said firmly. Turn it around. He stammered. Ma'am said, Ms. Winslow said you'd be waiting. She told us this was the main event. I stepped closer. This is private property. Turn it around. Behind him, kids peered through the windows. Some of them already had plastic pumpkins in their laps. I saw parents with cameras, babies with bibs that read, My First Pumpkin Patch. And somewhere near the back, a woman in yoga pants held a coffee cup like a shield. Please, I said to the driver, quieter now. You're a kid. Don't let that woman ruin your record. He swallowed. Okay, yeah, I'll call the coordinator. No need, because right then Karen pulled up. She drove a silver Lexus license plate reading HBRK1, like she was proud of being first in everything. She got out calmly, smoothing her windbreaker phone in hand. Tom, she called out as if we were business partners greeting each other before a fundraiser. We had such a great turnout. Look at this. Families are so excited. We didn't want to bother you with logistics. Hope that's okay. You organized a bus tour, I said, with my name, my address, my farm. Karen smiled like I'd complimented her. I'm filing for harassment and fraudulent use of property, I continued, starting Monday. The driver looked ready to cry. Ma'am, am I in trouble? Karen ignored him. Tom, let's not make a scene in front of the children. This is exactly the kind of negativity the HOA tries to reduce. Negativity, I snapped. You sent an entire parade to my gate. She turned to the families on the bus, who were now watching with wide eyes and frozen hands. Let's take 5, everyone, she said with a perfectly sweet voice. Mr. Rourke just needs a moment. Then she grabbed my elbow and yanked me 2 steps away. Are you trying to destroy your reputation? She hissed. Do you know how bad this looks? You're threatening children's joy, Tom. That's the headline. Veteran blocks fall tradition. I shook her hand off me. You're lying, and I've documented everything. Oh, she scoffed. So you'll go to court and tell them the HOA tried to give you free publicity. that we tried to improve property value by boosting community spirit. You trespassed. You staged events with my likeness. You cut my security line. She blinked only for a second, but I saw it. That flicker, that crack in her armor. You're delusional, she said finally, and marched back toward the crowd. All right, everyone, she called out. We're adjusting our route a little today. Apologies for the change. We'll be visiting the Hollow Brook Commons instead. The bus groaned as it reversed. Karen smiled and waved like a local celebrity, while parents offered sympathetic glances in my direction, some embarrassed, some annoyed, some simply confused. And then they were gone. The fog lifted just a little more, but the tension in my chest only thickened. I walked back inside, closed the door, and sat down. My coffee was cold. I opened my laptop and started uploading every video clip, every screenshot, every HOA newsletter, every drone capture, every voicemail, every flyer. I opened a folder on my desktop, named it Operation Autumn Overstep, and then I called my lawyer. Her name was Melanie Vu. She was a no-nonsense former city attorney turned private practice bulldog. I'd met her once during a zoning dispute she helped mediate when I was first buying the farm. She answered on the third ring. Tom Rourke, she said, what's happening? I think it's time to sue an HOA. There was a pause. Then how big is your folder? Growing every hour. Good, she said. Let's dig in. She asked for everything. Dates, names, photos, incident reports, emails. I sent it all. Then she asked something I hadn't considered. Do you know if they used HOA funds for this tour campaign? I froze. The flyers, the bus, the cider stands, the banners, they had to be paid for. And if HOA money paid for promotion using private land without consent, she began. It's misappropriation, I finished. Exactly, she said. And if she printed your name likeness or referenced your farm commercially, that's unauthorized use of a private entity. Add potential civil fraud. I've already spoken to the sheriff. They know she filed a false report against me. Melanie laughed softly. Oh, Karen, she has no idea who she's picked a fight with, does she? No, I said, staring out at my field at the pumpkins I'd raised by hand. But she's about to find out. By Monday morning, the folder titled Operation Autumn Overstep had tripled in size. Melanie had requested everything down to timestamps on photos and metadata from my trail cams. She walked me through the initial complaint filing for both civil trespass and misrepresentation. Don't worry about the court yet, she'd said. We start with documentation. Then we hit them with truth. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wanted my land back, my name, my peace, and every inch of dignity Karen thought she could stomp over with her clipboard and syrupy voice. The HOA board held its regular meeting every first Monday of the month at 6:00 p.m. in the Hollow Brook Clubhouse. I hadn't set foot inside that building since the day I moved in. That night, I walked through the doors with a folder in one hand and a flash drive in the other. The clubhouse was packed. Apparently, news of the pumpkin farm incident had spread fast. Some came with steaming cups of cider, others with frowns. A few shot me cautious nods, but most avoided my gaze. The long table at the front held 5 members of the HOA board, 3 women and 2 men, all dressed in seasonal colors, as if they were hosting Thanksgiving in advance. At the center, of course, was Karen. She wore a maroon blouse and a necklace shaped like an acorn. Her hair was tied into a perfectly symmetrical twist. In front of her sat a neatly arranged stack of agendas printed in trifold. Welcome, everyone, she said sweetly into the microphone. Let's begin by celebrating the success of our first fall engagement tour. We had over 60 participants, and thanks to all the volunteers who made that possible, especially those who gave their time and space for community growth. She glanced at me brief but pointed. I didn't flinch. When the floor opened for comments, I stood. Karen raised a brow. Mr. Rourke, please keep your remarks to under 3 minutes. I won't need 3. The room quieted. I walked to the podium and held up my flash drive. This contains video evidence of unauthorized use of my land, my name, and my property in the promotion of a Hollow Brook event, none of which I consented to. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Karen's smile strained. Additionally, I continued, I've documented multiple flyers, emails, voicemail recordings, and footage of HOA officials directing guests to my farm for a tour I never authorized. I've spoken with legal counsel. We are pursuing claims of trespass, misappropriation, and misuse of HOA funds for private gain. Karen tried to interject, Mr. Rourke, with all due respect. I'm not finished. The microphone caught my voice sharper than I intended. The silence afterward was full of weight. I held up a printed flyer. This is your advertisement. It uses my property name, my field, and even my goat without my consent. Laughter broke through the tension, a few chuckles from the back. Karen's jaw tightened. I clicked the projector remote. The big screen behind the board flickered, then displayed a still image from my trail cam, Karen leaning over the goat fence, zip-tying a petting zoo sign in the early morning. The timestamp blinked in bold white, 6:12 a.m. Gasps, some stifled laughs. A woman near the front dropped her pen. Karen leaned into her mic. That footage is taken out of context. I clicked again. Now a video played Karen at the cider table near the right-of-way, accepting a donation from a resident. Voice clear, support your HOA, whispering, Creek, thanks you for your help. I let it run for 10 seconds before pausing it again. I don't belong to your HOA. This farm is outside the boundary, always has been. A man on the board cleared his throat. Mr. Rourke, just to clarify, none of this was coordinated through the HOA board officially. These were individual actions. Then you'll have no problem releasing a public statement, I said, declaring that Whispering Creek Farm is not affiliated with your organization. Karen muttered something, but her mic was off. Also, I added, I'll be requesting a financial audit of HOA funds used for the tour bus flyers and refreshments. That got their attention. The treasurer, a pale man with nervous hands, shifted in his seat. I don't recall approving expenses for a bus. You didn't, I said, but the receipts are in your reimbursement logs. I have them. Karen was no longer smiling. I stepped back from the mic. I'm not your attraction. I'm not your backdrop. I'm your neighbor. I serve this country to protect the right of private citizens to live in peace. For a moment, no one said a word. Then a woman in the second row stood up. I brought my twins to that tour, she said. We thought it was real. I had no idea it wasn't approved. I'm sorry, Mr. Rourke. Someone else added, I heard Karen say Tom was part of the event, that he'd volunteered. More voices followed, questions, side comments, shifting support. Karen banged the gavel once. This is getting out of hand. A board member looked at her. Karen, did you do this without a vote? It was a community enhancement initiative, she said tightly. It didn't require a full vote under Clause 4.2. The secretary flipped through a binder. Clause 4.2 doesn't cover off-property events or monetary transactions. Karen turned red. I did what I thought was best for the community, and misrepresented a neighbor in the process, someone added. Isn't that grounds for formal review? Another voice chimed in. Karen stood abruptly. This meeting is over. But it wasn't. The board voted that night to initiate an internal ethics investigation into Karen Winslow's actions. Melanie called me after. They blinked, she said. They're panicking. I suggest we wait, let the board eat its own before we go full legal. I'm not backing down, I said. She chuckled. Oh, I didn't say back down. I said let them cook. Sometimes the cleanest wins come when you let people implode on their own. I sat on the porch that night, under the harvest moon. The goats were calm. The pumpkins glowed in the dark like lanterns. Karen had stirred the wrong storm. And for the first time since she showed up, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Stillness. But I knew her. She wasn't done. It happened 3 days after the board meeting. I'd just come in from the north field, arm sore from lifting a busted fence post. Marvin had rammed through again. I was halfway through peeling a clementine when I heard the knock, hard, deliberate, and distinctly not neighborly. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch. The taller one, Officer Peters, looked like he'd been carved out of tired stone. The other, younger, carried a body camera and kept a palm on his belt, like he wasn't sure if this was a friendly visit or a tactical situation. Mr. Rourke, Peters asked. I wiped my hands on a dish towel. That's me. He glanced at his notepad. We received a report of threats made against a member of the HOA board, a Ms. Karen Winslow. She claims you've been harassing her and interfering with official community activities. There it was, the move I'd been waiting for. She's accusing me of what exactly I asked. Peters looked uncomfortable. According to the statement, verbal intimidation, aggressive gestures at a public meeting, and, quote, creating a hostile environment for families and residents of Hollow Brook. I crossed my arms. Did she mention the part where she trespassed, staged unauthorized events on private land, and used my likeness without consent? He shifted his weight. Mr. Rourke, we're just following up. No charges have been filed yet. But there's an incident report in your system now, isn't there? I said, voice calm. The younger officer nodded. Yes, sir. She filed it 2 days ago. Said she feared retaliation after the HOA meeting. Retaliation? Karen was laying bricks for a narrative one where I was the unstable veteran lashing out over imagined slights intimidating sweet suburban women who just wanted to build community. They wanted me reactive. They wanted a scene, a crack in the calm, but I wasn't going to give them one. Instead, I walked to the hallway, pulled out the manila folder labeled Law Enforcement Correspondence, and handed it to Officer Peters. Timeline of all interactions, I said. Every flyer drone capture voicemail. Video of Karen placing unauthorized signage. Audio of her confirming she knew the farm was private. Records from the zoning office cease and desist letter and the HOA board minutes from Monday. Also included are receipts showing misuse of community funds. The officer skimmed quickly. The younger one blinked. She zip-tied a petting zoo sign to your goat pen. Yes, Marvin didn't appreciate it. Peters let out a breath that sounded suspiciously like a suppressed chuckle. Look, he said after a pause. We'll file this. But off the record, we've had more than a few colorful complaints from Karen in the past. Her name's not unfamiliar. That didn't surprise me. What do I need to do next, I asked. He lowered his voice. Install a second set of cameras. One watching the driveway. One watching your mailbox. Anything you can do to protect yourself from claims she might escalate to vandalism or aggression. I already have 3 cameras and a motion sensor, I said. Make it 5, he replied. After they left, I sat on the porch steps and watched the dust settle behind their cruiser. The anger simmered low in my gut. Not the kind that bursts, but the kind that holds its breath. The slow building kind. The kind you carry when you've seen too many good people falsely accused, while the guilty played victim like it was a sport. Later that afternoon, Melanie called. I got a copy of the incident report, she said without preamble. Karen really leaned into the fragile flower routine. She claimed I threatened her, indirectly. Said you made her feel unsafe during the board meeting. Claimed you loomed and used military language. What the hell is military language? She doesn't know. She just threw in aggressive tone and intimidating posture. I didn't even laugh. She's trying to build a psychological profile of you, Melanie said. Not in court, in the public eye. She wants you cast as unstable, dangerous. That way, when you press charges or file suit, people question your motives first. She's weaponizing perception. Exactly. There was a pause. Then Melanie said, I have a strategy. I sat up straighter. We file a formal notice of intent, she continued. Not to sue yet, but to inform the HOA board that legal action is being prepared against them collectively if they do not distance themselves from Karen's actions. That forces their hand. They'll either publicly censure her or double down. And if they double down, we go public. I know a reporter at the local paper. Small town scandal with a corrupt HOA and a decorated veteran farmer front page. I exhaled slowly. Do it. By Tuesday morning, the board had received Melanie's notice. By Wednesday afternoon, the HOA newsletter posted a brief statement. The Board of Hollowbrook does not endorse any unauthorized events or statements made by individual members. We remain committed to ethical governance and respectful, neighborly relations. No mention of Karen. No apology. But it was something. Still, she wasn't backing down. That night, as I was locking the barn, I found another flyer taped under the eave where the trail cam didn't reach. It was printed on bright orange paper in the same bubbly font. Pumpkin farm to be reviewed by county. Is it unsafe for families? Should we have a say? I stood there, flyer in hand, as the barn light flickered in the cooling dusk. She was going for character assassination. If she couldn't win in court, she'd try to poison the well. Well, she wasn't the only one who knew how to gather a crowd. The next morning, I started making calls. To the county planning office. To the local VFW. To the community garden club I'd once donated compost to. To the small town reporter who covered the local pet parade every year and owed me a favor after I pulled her dog out of the creek last spring. And then I called someone else. Someone Karen wouldn't expect. Sheriff Holt. Retired. Old school. Respected by everyone from ranchers to mayors. And my commanding officer once a long time ago. He picked up after the second ring. Rourke. I need a favor, I said. You got it. Because if Karen wanted attention, I'd give her a spotlight. And let everyone see what was really going on behind the smiling flyers and pumpkin banners. By Friday, the air had changed. Karen had ramped up her smear campaign in ways that no longer felt amateur. She'd submitted a noise complaint about goat bleeding exceeding residential decibel levels. She emailed the county zoning board with claims that I had unauthorized irrigation structures along the edge of the creek. She even filed a sanitation concern citing animal feces near produce as a health risk. But the one that got the most traction, the one she pushed hardest, was about safety, specifically my mental stability. According to one of her anonymous posts on the Hollowbrook online bulletin board, I had been seen pacing with tools in hand, muttering threats to invisible people, and acting erratically around school-aged children. It was accompanied by a blurry photo of me digging a trench for a drainage pipe, likely taken from the drone. The comments under the post were a mixed bag. Some neighbors defended me, some were cautious, and a few, those closest to Karen, no doubt leaned into the drama. I always thought he seemed intense. Didn't he used to be in the Army? You never know with PTSD. This isn't safe for our kids. And then Saturday morning, she crossed a line I didn't think even she would dare to step over. I was watering the back edge of the field when a black and white sheriff's vehicle pulled into the driveway. Not the usual city police. This was the county sheriff's office. And when the door opened, the man who stepped out was broad-shouldered, slow-moving, and unmistakable, even with silver now overtaking the black in his hair. Sheriff Daniel Holt, my former commanding officer. Back when I was young green and far too eager to prove myself, Holt had been the one who taught me that real strength didn't come from yelling. It came from knowing when to hold the line. He retired from active duty a decade before me moved into law enforcement and had been serving Wilmot County ever since. I set the hose down and walked to meet him. Holt, I said, nodding once. He gave me a half smile. Rourke, you look like you're aging better than I am. Doubt that. Mind if we talk? I gestured to the porch. Always. We sat in the shade. Marvin the goat wandered over, nudged Holt's boot, then decided the man was too serious and wandered off again. So I said, "You're not here for coffee, are you?" "No," Holt sighed. "I got a formal request from the HOA to perform a welfare check." I blinked. "You're kidding." He shook his head. "They phrased it as a community safety precaution. Said there were reports you've been erratic, possibly armed, threatening to residents." I exhaled slowly, all fabricated. I figured. He paused, then added, "You mind if I ask, are you armed?" I raised an eyebrow. "I mean right now," he clarified. "Anything on you?" I lifted my shirt just enough to show an empty waistband. Only tool I had this morning was a wrench for the hose connection. He nodded. "Good. I figured as much, but I've got to ask. Protocol." "Understood." We sat in silence for a moment. The porch fan squeaked on its rusted hinge. Marvin let out a lazy bleat from across the yard. Finally, Holt spoke again. "What in God's name did you do to that woman to make her go nuclear like this?" I said no. He smiled wryly. "That'll do it." Then he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Tom, off the record, I've seen this kind of thing before. It starts small, a boundary issue. Then someone with power and no brakes decides they're owed something. When they don't get it, they don't back off. They escalate. And if you push back, they flip the narrative." "She's already flipping it," I said, "trying to make me out to be unstable. Dangerous. I know." He tapped his boot against the step. "But here's the thing, I know you. I trained you. I've read your service record. You are not a threat to anyone. Except pumpkins," I muttered. Holt chuckled. "Exactly." He straightened up. "Look, the formal complaint requires I file a basic welfare report. I'll mark you as responsive cooperative, no concerns. But off the record, what's your next move?" I didn't hesitate. "Public." He tilted his head. "I'm organizing a community harvest event," I said. "Not HOA approved. Not for profit. Donation-based, supporting veterans. I've invited the VFW, the county paper, a few local businesses. And I'll have signage clarifying exactly where the property line ends and who is and isn't welcome to organize here." Holt whistled. "That'll rattle her." "I'm done playing defense." He stood, brushed his hands on his jeans. "You're doing it right. Stay visible, stay calm. Let her unravel herself." He paused, then added, "You need anything, security, legal support, even just backup, let me know." I nodded. "Thank you." As he drove away, I watched the taillights disappear down the dusty lane. Later that afternoon, I printed out the official property boundary lines and laminated them. I staked them around the field perimeter with bold red arrows. Private property. No tours. No entry without written consent. Then I began designing the flyers for the harvest event. Simple, clean, no pumpkin caricatures, just the truth. Whispering Creek Veterans Harvest Day. Date, October 21st. Time, 10:00 a.m., 4:00 p.m. Where? Private land of Thomas Rourke. Purpose, community healing and honor. Entry, free to donations to the Wilmot Veterans Fund, welcomed. No HOA affiliation. I posted one to the community bulletin board. By dusk, it had 27 comments online, most of them positive. A few critical ones too, no doubt, from Karen's circle, but they were drowned out by neighbors, curious, hopeful, and tired of HOA drama. But the best part, the next morning when I walked down the driveway, there was another flyer posted right next to mine. Someone had scrawled it by hand. It read, "All goat petting, HOA tours." And underneath in block letters, "We stand with Tom." Karen had tried to isolate me, but in doing so, she'd revealed just how many people had been waiting for someone to push back. And now they weren't just watching. They were standing up too. By the following Monday, Hollow Brook's prim and polished veneer had started to crack. I could feel it in the glances from neighbors who used to avoid eye contact. I could see it in the way conversations in the local cafe paused when I walked in, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. And I could see it most clearly in Karen's smile, because now it had a twitch. She passed me on the sidewalk outside the post office, her heels clicking like gunshots on concrete. "Morning, Tom," she said through clenched teeth. "Karen, you know it's disappointing," she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "All this tension. The HOA is supposed to unite neighbors." "It usually does," I replied, "when it isn't staging coups on private farmland." Her lips curled not quite into a smile. "We'll see who the community supports in the end. I think we already are." That afternoon, Melanie filed the formal complaint with the Wilmot County Civil Court. We included everything trespass documentation, screenshots of flyers using my name, and imagery, drone footage, financial records showing HOA reimbursement for tour-related expenses, and the sheriff's welfare check report cleared with no issues. But what made the case stronger was what we found buried in the HOA's bylaws and expense reports. Melanie had a paralegal named Joanna, a quiet research wizard who never smiled but worked like a machine. She discovered a line item labeled Community Culture and Outreach, Discretionary Fund, which had been drawn from for several expenditures related to the Pumpkin Tour. There was no board vote recorded for the use of that fund on these events, meaning Karen had likely processed the expenses herself and then backfilled the paper trail. Sloppy and damning. Melanie's eyes lit up when she saw it. She diverted funds without board approval. That's breach of fiduciary duty. What does that mean in plain English? She's about to have the worst fall of her life, and it won't involve leaves. But we weren't done. To pile on pressure, we submitted a second complaint, not to the court this time, but to the State Board of Homeowners Associations, an oversight body that rarely got involved in petty neighborhood drama, unless someone like Karen caught their attention. Melanie drafted the complaint meticulously. Unauthorized use of a private citizen's identity in a commercial promotion. Use of HOA resources for events on non-HOA property. False police reports intended to intimidate and defame. Systematic harassment of a non-member homeowner. She attached screenshots from the HOA newsletter that implied the farm tour was a sanctioned event, complete with Karen's name in the corner as community chair. Then came the cherry on top. One of the residents, Linda Markey, a soft-spoken woman with 3 kids and a high tolerance for nonsense, forwarded us a private email from Karen. It had been sent to a group of parents before the tour, and it read, "Mr. Rourke has agreed in spirit, if not formally, to allow the tour. He's a quiet man, but supports community engagement. If you hear otherwise, please be kind. He's struggling with post-service reintegration." Melanie nearly dropped her coffee when she read it. She weaponized your military service. That's character defamation and a privacy violation. Linda agreed to make a formal statement, and with that, we had something rare in these types of conflicts: motive, action, documentation, and witness testimony. It was no longer about property lines or goats or pumpkin flyers. It was about principle. It was about what happens when a person in power believes the rules don't apply to them, when they forget that being polite doesn't mean being weak. But Karen wasn't folding yet. The very next day, HOA members received an emergency newsletter titled Community Safety Concerns and Rumors, a statement from the board chair. It read, In times of conflict, it's important we remain united as a community. Recent false accusations have been made against the HOA and certain individuals who have worked tirelessly to bring joy to our neighborhood. While we respect the rights of all homeowners, yes, even those who live technically adjacent, we must remain vigilant against misinformation and divisiveness. We will not be bullied by legal threats or intimidation tactics. At the bottom, in smaller print, Whispering Creek Farm is not affiliated with the HOA or any of its events. There it was, the first crack. I printed the statement, circled the last line, and pinned it to my bulletin board. But that wasn't the only thing that arrived that day. A certified letter came from the Hollow Brook HOA legal representative, a firm I'd never heard of. It was a WAS pre-litigation notice, warning me that my recent harvest event flyers had potentially caused reputational harm to the HOA, and suggested I take corrective action by removing inflammatory signage and social media posts. I handed the letter to Melanie. She didn't laugh. She grinned like a shark. "They're panicking," she said. "This is a bluff, a weak one. And it proves they're not coordinating internally. You can smell desperation in every line." Do I respond? Not yet. Let them sweat. We'll use it in court to show they're trying to silence you through legal intimidation. Meanwhile, RSVP numbers for my event passed 200. The community response was overwhelming. Dozens of veterans messaged me on social media offering to volunteer. A local country band offered to play for free. The coffee shop downtown donated cider. Even the county librarian offered to set up a kids' reading tent. It wasn't just a harvest day anymore. It was a statement. On Thursday, I drove into town to pick up more fencing supplies and a portable toilet rental for the event. As I pulled into the parking lot of the supply store, a voice called out from behind me, "Rourke." I turned to see a familiar face, Jerry Parsons, former city councilman and longtime fixture of Wilmot County politics. We'd butted heads years ago over zoning for my barn, but he'd always been fair. He shook my hand firmly. "I heard about what's going on. Karen's been trying to get the county involved behind your back. Complaints about drainage noise, livestock. Typical Karen." I nodded. "She's escalating." "She's losing," he corrected. "Keep doing what you're doing. She's made enemies on the board she doesn't even know about yet." And with that, he tipped his hat and walked off. That night, as the sun dropped low and golden over the pumpkins, I stood on my porch and looked out over the field. Strings of lights were already going up. Volunteers had begun carving out space for booths and hay bales. Marvin snorted happily in the distance, chewing on something he definitely wasn't supposed to eat. I thought about all the fights I'd been in across deserts, jungles, boardrooms. This one was different. This one was for home. October 21st dawned crisp and golden, the kind of autumn morning that makes you forget everything bad in the world for just a second. The field was quiet at first, too quiet. The kind of quiet before a crowd. I stood out by the gate, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other, watching mist rise off the pumpkins. At 8:45 a.m., the first car pulled in. By 9:00, we had a line of minivans, pickups, and even a few bicycles parked along the designated gravel shoulder. Volunteers in matching green shirts, half of them veterans, the other half neighbors, helped direct traffic, pass outsider, and gently guide people toward the signs that read, "Welcome to Whispering Creek Veterans Harvest Day. This event is not affiliated with the HOA." By 10:00, we'd counted over 200 attendees. People brought folding chairs. Someone set up a small stage. A local string quartet tuned their instruments next to the goat pen, where Marvin was already stealing the show. And then came the reporters. 2 from the county paper, 1 from a regional online blog, another surprisingly from a mid-tier state publication that had caught wind of the HOA controversy and was now sniffing for a feature story. They asked about the event, about the farm, and very gently about Karen. I stuck to the high road. "This is about community," I said. "It's about reclaiming space for peace and good people." But the real drama wasn't here. It was back at the Hollow Brook Clubhouse. Unbeknownst to me, the HOA board had called an emergency session that morning, trying to get ahead of the optics. Word had spread that I had outdrawn their annual fall festival. Some board members were furious, others embarrassed. And then there were the ones who just wanted to save face. That's when Melanie called. She was at the clubhouse. "Tom," she said, her voice calm but electric, "they just voted." "Voted on what?" Karen, a motion for removal. I blinked. They kicked her off the board. She tried to counter with a speech about vision and neighborhood safety, but someone on the board brought up the drone footage, the illegal flyers, and the unauthorized use of funds. Once the treasurer confirmed the discretionary line items matched your evidence, it was over. I exhaled slowly. They finally turned on her. Not just turned, Melanie said. They burned the bridge. Apparently, Karen had tried to accuse another board member of collusion with me, said there was a conspiracy to undermine her leadership. That was the final straw. Even her allies voted yes. She was removed permanent, not suspended. Ethics clause. Immediate revocation of privileges. When the motion passed, she'd stormed out, knocking over a decorative pumpkin display on the way. And it didn't stop there. The story ran that evening. Local HOA chair removed amid scandal over unauthorized farm event. It made the front page of the Wilmot Weekly and was already getting shared online. The picture, a still from the drone footage, Karen standing with her back to the Whispering Creek sign, zipping up her windbreaker, looking over her shoulder. That was the moment her smile finally cracked into something real. But me, I was still on the field, laughing with neighbors, teaching kids how to gently hold a baby pumpkin without snapping the stem, talking to vets who hadn't left the house in months until today, listening to music under the blue October sky while the goats nibbled their way through half a bale of hay. At one point, a woman I didn't recognize walked up to me. "Mr. Rourke," she asked gently, "I just wanted to thank you. My husband's a Marine. He hasn't come to a public event in 5 years, but he's here. He's smiling." I swallowed hard. "Tell him I said welcome home," I whispered. Later, someone pulled me aside to say that Karen had driven by the field 3 times that day, once even slowing down to take pictures. But she never got out of the car. I didn't see her, and I didn't care to. The event ended just after sunset. The lights twinkled across the field as people trickled out, still chatting, some making plans to return next year. Volunteers stayed behind to help clean up. A few even offered to help build a permanent structure for future events. Before leaving, one of the veterans, Sam, an older guy with a limp and a voice like gravel, gripped my shoulder. "You know, he said you didn't just win against her." I raised an eyebrow. "You reminded people what community actually means." By the time I went to bed that night, my voicemail was full of messages, people wanting to help neighbors, asking if they could plant wildflowers in the back field. Someone suggesting we start a seasonal CSA. And tucked under my front door was a handwritten letter. No signature, just the words. "I'm sorry for what she did to you. Thank you for standing up." I folded the letter and placed it inside the same folder where I'd once kept all the documentation. The battle was over. But what had grown here on this farm, in this neighborhood, in the hearts of people who came together when decency needed defending, was something much bigger. Karen had built a fence. I'd opened a gate. The morning after the event, I walked the rows barefoot again, just like I used to before all the drama. The earth was still cool from the night, soft under my heels, the kind of soil that only speaks in silence. The pumpkins looked tired but proud, like soldiers after parade. The signs were still up. "Welcome to Whispering Creek Veterans Harvest Day." Faded slightly by dew, but untouched. Not a single one vandalized, stolen, or mocked. That said more than any headline ever could. I stood in the field, breathing it in, the scent of wood smoke still faint in the air from yesterday's fire pit. The sweet decay of hay, trampled by children's feet, the distant laughter I could still hear if I closed my eyes. It was quiet now, but not empty. In fact, it felt fuller than it ever had. The goats bleated lazily behind me, Marvin still chewing on the bottom of someone's leftover RSVP card. A good-natured defiance in his eyes. My kind of goat. Later that day, Melanie called with the final update. Well, she began, "I have some news." I leaned against the porch post. "Good or bad?" "Good." The state HOA Oversight Board concluded their preliminary investigation. Karen's actions were deemed grossly negligent and beyond the scope of her authority. She's now banned from holding any HOA leadership position in the state for the next 10 years. I blinked. That's specific. She's lucky they didn't press for criminal charges. Misuse of funds, false police reports, impersonation of community consent. If we pushed, she'd be explaining herself to a judge. We're not pushing. Melanie hesitated. "That depends on you." I looked out over the land, my land, where not even 6 months ago I thought I'd have to fight tooth and nail just to preserve a little peace. Now it didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like a legacy. No, I said quietly. Let it end here. She did enough damage to herself. You're sure? She lost her power. That's enough. Melanie paused, then added, You're a better man than I am. I smiled. No. I've just seen how bitterness eats people alive. I'd rather plant pumpkins. We both laughed. A full, real, earned kind of laugh. One that came from knowing we'd done the right thing and won. That night, I made a decision. I went online and created a basic website, whisperingcreekfarm.org. Not for profit, no glossy ads or bookings. Just a single page that read, Whispering Creek Farm is a private veteran-owned sanctuary built for peace healing and community. We are not affiliated with any homeowners association. We welcome guests by invitation, and events will always be run with honor, integrity, and consent. Thank you for respecting the land. Thomas Rourke. Within a week, the site had 200 visits and 24 emails, most from other veterans. Some from families nearby, and a few from people across the country who had simply heard about the HOA pumpkin farm guy. Apparently, the blog post from the regional paper had gone semi-viral. They titled it, When a Pumpkin Farmer Said No How One Man Stood His Ground Against an HOA Giant. The comments were full of stories. One man in Arizona who said his HOA fined him for parking his truck in his own driveway. A woman in Oregon whose community garden was shut down because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. A single mom in Texas who'd been harassed for building a ramp for her disabled son without design review approval. I replied to each of them. Not with legal advice, I'm no lawyer, but with encouragement. Because I understood now. This wasn't just about pumpkins. It never was. It was about people needing permission to say, No, you don't get to take this from me. A few days later, Sheriff Holt came by. No uniform. Just a flannel shirt and a smile. He helped me install a proper signpost at the end of the drive. We dug the hole by hand, poured the concrete, and mounted the sign together. Private property veteran owned, respect welcome. He stood back and admired it. Looks better than any HOA plaque I've ever seen. Before he left, he handed me an envelope. What's this? I asked. A thank you, he said, from the VFW and from Wilmot County. Inside was a simple letter of recognition. Not a medal, not a proclamation, just words. For protecting not just land, but the idea that home should mean safety, not submission. I framed it, hung it right next to the old photo of me and my unit in Kandahar, 2004. We looked younger then, naive. But even back in those days, we understood one thing better than most. The fight isn't always over land. Sometimes it's over the right to call it your own. Weeks passed, fall deepened. The field turned amber and gold, the air sharpened. And then, one evening, just before the frost came in, I got another knock on the door. It was a young couple new to the neighborhood. Hi, the woman said shyly. We heard about your farm, and we were wondering, do you do school visits? My son's class is studying agriculture. And well, we understand it's private. I smiled. I looked out past them across the dusk-lit field, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to defend it. I felt like I could share it. Not tours, I said, but maybe a learning day. Small group, kids only. She lit up, really. Sure, but one condition. Anything. You leave the clipboard at home. She laughed. And just like that, Whispering Creek turned a new page. No banners, no flyers, no busloads of guests. Just stories and roots and quiet victories planted deep in the soil.